The room is alive. Music pulsing, glass catching light, conversations weaving in and out like loose threads. I'm standing in a small circle, familiar faces, kind eyes, soft laughter. One hand wrapped around a drink, the other tracing small gestures in the air. I laugh at the right moments. I nod with warmth. I am here, and yet I'm not really here. Inside there's a hollow, folding inwards. Not pain exactly, more like distance. Like the scene is playing, but I'm behind a pane of glass. A thin film between me and the world. And in that glassy quiet, a thought arises. Quiet, cold, precise. What if abandonment is not something inside you, but a fundamental feature of how reality is structured? And what would that mean for your abandonment anxiety in relationships? Hello again, I'm Indiana, and this is the Dating Academy. If you've listened to the first two parts of this trilogy, you already know. We move slowly here. We don't fix, we don't hack, we don't sell. We inquire, we reflect, and we do so gently but precisely. I speak to those of you in the depths of your own relational questions, but also to coaches, trainers, and therapists, those holding space for others who need, more than ever, clarity and non-identification. Today's episode is called Ontology of Abandonment. It's the third and final part of our series. The first was Fear of Abandonment, and we met Kierkegaard there. The second was Power of Abandonment, and Hegel walked beside us. And now, we go deeper. Not just into the psyche, but into the structure of being itself. We ask, what kind of world do we inhabit that makes abandonment possible at all? Ontology is a big word with a simple root. Onto means being. Logi means account or study. So, ontology is the account of being. What exists? What's there? What makes up the very structure of reality? Think of it like this. If you describe your living room by saying it has a beige sofa, a stack of books, and 3 empty coffee mugs, that's content. But if you say, this room is organized around the ritual of return, you're speaking ontologically. You're pointing to the way space structures experience. And that's what we're doing today. We're not asking what you feel. We're asking what kind of world those feelings arise in. Even terms like trauma, attachment, or anxiety, for example, all belong to the ontology of psychology. Yet, we often treat them with a certain value label attached to them, rather than as value-free entities open to a more value-free inquiry. And that is why I want to introduce a particular connotation of a very familiar word: worthless. Not in the sense of a value judgment, but as without any ethical value valuation, to be value-free. When we use the word worthless in this special connotation today, we are not using it to suggest that something has no worth. We are not condemning anything. We are attempting to describe the thing itself as it ontologically is without grading it. So today, we examine abandonment not as a moral drama, but as something worthless. Simply something that is. Our featured philosopher today is Martin Heidegger. Heidegger was born in 1889 in a small town called Meßkirch. He studied theology first, but turned to philosophy. Influenced by Husserl, he taught in Marburg and later in Freiburg. His main work, Being and Time, changed the course of 20th century thought. He wrote in dense, coiled sentences, but underneath that complexity was a burning desire to ask, what does it mean to be? In the Black Forest, he had a hut, his Todtnauburg retreat, where he walked, wrote, and sat with silence. A place where world wasn't an idea, but a texture, a nearness. Now, Heidegger is often called an existentialist, like Sartre or Nietzsche. But Heidegger wasn't primarily focused on freedom or meaning or the self. His focus was on being itself. He asked, what is it like to exist at all? And unlike Kierkegaard, who focused on anxiety, or Hegel, who charted recognition, Heidegger focused on the structure that makes all of that possible. He's not in the psyche, he's in the soil. And yes, he joined the Nazi Party, briefly served as rector, and was banned from teaching after the war. We name that. But today we're working with concepts, not condoning choices. Ideas must be held to the light on their own terms. So think of Heidegger not as a guide for the soul, but as a cartographer of the world in which we date, long, goose, begin again. Are you ready? Fasten your seatbelts. We're going in for a deep dive. Now, what if we think of abandonment not just as a thing that happens, but as a structure we live in? Heidegger offers 4 key terms: thrownness, falling, being with, and care. All of them describe our condition as humans. Not what we feel, but the kind of world in which feelings arise. Thrownness means we always begin in the middle. You didn't choose your body, your language, your early loves. You were thrown into a world already in motion, like a character entering mid-scene. And then there's falling. It doesn't mean collapse. It means being caught up in distraction, in social norms, in trying to be the person others want us to be. In dating, this might look like checking your phone every 2 minutes after a text, or crafting that one message 7 different ways. You're not broken. You're just in the fall. Heidegger's term, being with, tells us we are never not in relation. Even alone, you're with the absence of others. Ghosting, for example, isn't just a personal hurt. It's a tear in the fabric of the world you shared. Suddenly, something disappears. A rhythm collapses. That's not just emotional, it's ontological. And finally, care. For Heidegger, we are beings whose structure is care. We are not things, we are concerns, intentions, involvements. When we say someone is not okay, we often mean their care has collapsed. They no longer know what matters or how to move toward it. And dating, at its core, is always entangled with care. We open, we offer, we seek contact. And sometimes, we fall through the floor. What if we paused here? Not to fix, but to read. To let somberness speak. To let the world show us what's been broken. After a breakup, after a ghosting, after abandonment, ask, what part of my world has disappeared? What rhythm collapsed? What kind of care was I hoping for? And in what form did I fall? Here are 2 small practices. One is a ritual repair. Choose a physical object that represented your connection. And instead of discarding it in anger, repurpose it. Turn the playlist into a walking companion. Turn the shared mug into a plant holder. Not to romanticize, but to rethread care. The second is an anti-strategy day. No productivity, no optimization. Just a walk, some notes, and the question, what matters when I am not managing? So let's gather the core statements. Thrownness, being with, care, falling. Being human means being thrown into existence, always already entangled with care. When someone leaves or disappears or withdraws, it's not just a feeling. It's an ontological shift, a crack in the ground you stand on. How does your fear of abandonment change when you see it not as failure, but as a feature? And now, let me take you to a garden. The Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus goes to a garden with his closest friends. He says, "My soul is sorrowful, even to the point of death." He asks them, "Stay awake with me," but they fall asleep. Again and again, he prays, "Let this cup pass from me, but if not, your will be done." He knows what's coming. He knows they'll leave, and still he stays. He doesn't run. He accepts the cup, the weight, the aloneness. This isn't just theology, it's structure. Surrounded and yet abandoned. Held and yet alone. The cup is the reality we don't choose. Gethsemane is not a failure of love. It's a moment of full presence inside abandonment. What were your own Gethsemane moments? When did the world thin and the cup not pass? What is your cup in dating? What part of care do you carry, whether it's returned? And how would your fear shift if you saw abandonment not as enemy, but as a terrain? Before we close, there's one more thread I want to pull into this fabric, a human thread. We've spoken of Heidegger as a thinker, but he was also, perhaps painfully so, a man. In 1924, he began a secret affair with an 18-year-old student. Her name was Hannah Arendt. He was 35, married, her professor. And yet, their bond would stretch across decades, through silence, exile, war, and return. After the war, they reconnected. Letters passed between them, full of affection, asymmetry, and something that seems to defy easy explanation. Arendt herself, brilliant, Jewish, and later one of the fiercest chroniclers of totalitarianism, had fled the very regime Heidegger had joined. And still, she defended the philosophical significance of his work. She helped him during the denazification period. She called his thinking great. And many, then and now, have asked, how could she? What does it mean to be faithful to a mind that stood on the wrong side of history? And more pointedly, what does it reveal about Heidegger himself? What does it mean to write of authenticity while living in contradiction? What does it mean to speak of care while causing harm? Can a philosophy of being stand apart from the being of the philosopher? These are not questions of blame. They are questions of coherence, of trust, of integration. Perhaps this is the final abandonment we must reckon with, the abandonment of complexities. The dream that a brilliant mind must also be a clear soul. Sometimes the most precise maps are drawn by those who could not walk them cleanly. Sometimes we learn from the very ruptures they could not mend. And perhaps that's where our own task begins, not to imitate, not to excuse, but to inquire, honestly, tenderly, into what kind of being we want to be. Some tips if you're still walking with this. Take a blank page. Write one sentence. Then, let it remain empty. Let the blankness speak. It's not a lack. It's a text. Second, a micro-ritual. Light a candle for the rhythm that broke. Name it. Extinguish. Third, 3 phrases to take into a date. This part of me needs warmth. I don't always know how to trust. Care feels risky, but I'm trying. Let them open a door, not for fixing, for being with. And now, let's gather the trilogy. Kierkegaard showed us fear. Hegel revealed recognition and power. Heidegger gave us the ground. Together, they don't fix abandonment. They reframe it. Not as someone left me, but as a moment when our care, our meaning, our involvement needed to be redrawn. You can feel the fear. You can long for the recognition. You can read the ground. And then, in that quiet, you can choose how to care again. Congratulations on the ones that are still here. You made it till the end of a somewhat complex philosophy of a somewhat complex man. Don't be ashamed to put your questions in the comments, even if they sound too simple to you. In philosophy, every question matters. Please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and check our website for the latest updates on our work. This is Indiana Mahoiï signing off for this episode of the Dating Academy podcast series on abandonment. And for now, keep asking, keep sharing,